Dhruva Maharaj is a very important person in the Bhagavatam, and he's a very important person in the whole universe. One of the things that he's very important for in the whole universe is, according to Vedic cosmology, he is residing and presiding in Dhruvaloka, which is the pole star, around which all the Bhuvar and Svargaloka planets rotate. We'll hear some more towards the end of this section. It comes in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of the topics, after Sarga and Visarga comes Manvantar. So Sarga is the creation of Lord Vishnu, found in the 3rd canto. And then Visarga is the sub-creation of Brahma, found in both the 2nd and the 3rd canto. And once the universe is all filled up, is created, the structure is created, then comes filling up the universe. So the Manus and the Prajapatis that are sons of Manu begin the business of filling up the universe with living entities. And one of those first living entities generated directly from the body of Lord Brahma is Swayambhuva Manu, the very, very beginning of creation. Swayambhuva Manu appeared directly from the body of Lord Brahma, along with his good wife Shatarupa, and they appeared in their adult feature. Pretty unique. And Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa, as you see in the family chart here, they had 3 daughters and 2 sons. In the end of the 3rd canto, we hear about one of the 3 daughters, and her name was Devahuti. We don't hear so much about her 2 sisters. They're mentioned in the beginning part of the 4th canto. Devahuti, Prasuti, and Akuti. And we hear a lot about Devahuti and her marriage with Kardama Muni and Kapila Deva as their son and so forth, and the 9 daughters that came from them, and they were then given to different sages to help in the Prajapati program. The elder of the 2 brothers we hear about in the early parts of the 4th canto, Uttanapada and Priyavrata. Priyavrata was the elder brother. Priyavrata requested his father, Swayambhuva Manu, that I really don't want to become a king, become an emperor of the world. No, thank you. I'd like to just go to the forest and focus on perfecting my life in devotion to Krishna. But my younger brother, Uttanapada, he's very qualified. So let him become the king. So Uttanapada became the king with the consent of Swayambhuva Manu. And Uttanapada had 2 queens, Suniti and Suruchi. Dhruva was the firstborn son, thereby to become the next king. And Suruchi had the younger son, Uttama. So Dhruva and Uttama, we're going to hear more about them, so remember their names. They come towards the final chapters of the Dhruva Maharaj story. Part of Dhruva Maharaj's story is he went deep into Mahavan in Vrindavan, assigned to him by Narada Muni. And when you visit that place, Dhruva Tila means hill, so you go up a hill, and there you'll find this deity at the top. Vishnu in the center, Narada on one side, and little Dhruva on the other side. So we're going to now just get a little introduction to the whole topic of Dhruva Maharaj. The topic of Dhruva Maharaj is outlined in the Canto 4, Chapter 8, text number 8. Prabhupada gives right in the purport 6 important subject matters to be covered in the Dhruva story. Something that's advisable when you begin a journey like this is to have in mind your sankalpa, your intention. What would you like to receive from this time we spent together? So it's maybe a little bit of a surprise question for all of you. But I'll see if there's some persons that want to volunteer. What's your expectation? What do you hope to receive from hearing about Dhruva Maharaj? Besides some nice pictures and interesting story, some intrigue, a little bit of skullduggery. Yes. Okay, good. Our story is going to be different, but there's principles that can be applied according to our own personal lives. Definitely. Definitely. There are lessons to be learned in how to progress on our spiritual path. Yes.
How initially Dhruva Maharaj approached the Supreme Lord for satisfying his material desire, but how he finally turned into a very great devotee. So
yeah. How to move from sakama to nishkam bhakti. At least how Dhruva did it. And in principle, then it's going to be a different story than how we're going to do it, but how to do it. Good. Anyone else? How about you?
How to be in determination, like Dhruva.
How to get determination like Dhruva had. All power to you. Or at least along that direction. Because he had like super determination. Anything else?
How to follow the instructions of the spiritual master as it is.
Okay. Yeah.
Like more like about bhakti and like also determination and also spiritual benefit and bhakti. Like, yes.
Well, you're saying 2 things, but it sounded like 1 thing. Is there 2 things? It's 1 thing. Yes, okay. Okay. How about you? What would you hope to receive from the time that we spend together discussing about the story of Dhruva Maharaj? So you hope to learn more about the story of his life. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Yes. How close he is? Merciful. Merciful. Very good. Yeah.
Even if devotees are seeking only spiritual desire, Krishna makes sure that they are materially
Fulfilled. That's not normally how people think of the Dhruva story, but it's true. It's true. You can look up a verse later. You can look up a verse, because I just spent some time discussing this. 5:19:27, where it said that Krishna says, even if somebody approaches me for something material, I'm not so foolish. I'm not going to give them something material because they'll get entangled. But when I give them something material, I do it in such a way that they'll no longer have that material desire, because I'll give them my lotus feet, shelter at my lotus feet. Okay, yes.
Krishna and then after he helps, devotees what the feelings of anger, bitterness.
Yeah, very important part. Very important. Besides the material desire of wanting a kingdom, there was, pretty negative desires. Retribution, get back mentality, and how Krishna helps one get free from that. Good. Okay, here's what Srila Prabhupada writes, 488 Bhagavatam, 6 benefits of or from hearing Dhruva Maharaj's pastimes. Here we go. Detachment from material possessions, both gross and subtle material possessions. Now the image on the left is really clear, breaking the chains of attachment to material possessions. Gross and subtle. The image on the right, it's a much smaller picture, but there's one devotee who's worshiping Krishna without any material want, and there's another fellow who's running away with as much as he can get. Doesn't show whether he's worshiping or not. He's just he has a lot of material attachment. So detachment from material possessions or possessiveness, and enhancement of one's devotional service by austerities and penances. Now, the austerities and penances that we might do in devotional service are not at all like what Dhruva did, but the principle of accepting some inconvenience, a really nice one. I don't know if it's your favorite, but it's one of my favorites, and that's Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi. And there's different gradations of observing Pandava Nirjala Ekadasi. And I know some devotees that they observe Nirjala Ekadasi every Ekadasi. But, accepting some kind of unauspicious days, this is right in Bhagavad Gita purport, the austerities suited for bhakti practitioners is unauspicious days except some inconvenience, some reducing on the material and some increasing on the spiritual side. And so how that austerity and penance can enhance, enrich our devotional service. Body, mind, and words, categories of austerities. So detachment, enhancement, improvement of our faith in Krishna. Now this shows a little fellow, How to Know Krishna book. And here comes Krishna through the door. By cultivation, now in Dhruva's case, his faith in Krishna came about through his mother. And the improvement of his faith came about through his mother. And through Nard, of course. But improvement of faith coming from hearing about Krishna from proper authorities, as someone else already said, from the spiritual master. Elevation to the transcendental platform of devotional service. Now, it includes becoming detached, but that was the first one. This is now elevation to the transcendental. This is Prabhupada's words directly from this purport. And the final one? No, number 5. Connection and experience of the personality of Godhead. No, it didn't say not just intellectually, but it's not just intellectually. we would like to have an experience. I'm going to read something to you I think you'll like. One of my godbrothers sent this to me, which I couldn't read while I was in the airplane, but as soon as I landed, it's like really nice. Srila Prabhupada's first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar Mishra, was a respectable Sanskrit scholar and teacher who held an MA and PhD title. In an interview for the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita in the 1970s, conducted by Bahushira Das, Acharya Prabhakar stated, in 1954, he was with Srila Prabhupada on Krishna Janmashtami in Jhansi, 1954. He related how he woke up at 1 a.m. and heard Srila Prabhupada ecstatically playing Mridanga in the temple room upstairs. He went upstairs and saw Srila Prabhupada dancing around the temple room, performing Mridanga. Prabhupada was wearing a kadamba flower garland that went all the way down to his feet. Kadamba flowers are very rare in Jhansi, and when they are available, they are usually the size of golf balls, because kadamba flowers are round. And, they're modest in size. But the ones Srila Prabhupada was wearing were the size of tennis balls. The entire room was surcharged with the fragrance of the heavenly planets. Acharya Prabhakar asked Srila Prabhupada, where did this garland come from? It's not available from the market. But Srila Prabhupada would not answer. His divine grace just kept on performing kirtan, chanting and dancing around the room. The next morning, Acharya Prabhakar asked Srila Prabhupada, where did you get the garland? Why does it have such rich fragrance? And why were you feeling so blissful? Srila Prabhupada replied, I was chanting to Krishna and feeling some love for him. And he appeared and gave me this garland. I went to touch his feet and he disappeared. Because of that, I was dancing around the temple room. Srila Prabhupada then began crying. Acharya Prabhakar also related that sometimes Prabhupada's mood was to perform kirtan very intensely. He would chant on and on and on for 3 days straight. Such are the pastimes of a pure devotee, immersed in love for the Lord. Connection and experience of the personality of Godhead, not just intellectually. And that is, Krishna has affection for everyone, and especially for those who have affection for him. Naturally. Now, the starting point for Dhruva wasn't specifically affection, but it became that. And here's what Prabhupada writes, the 6th item. Hearing about this story generates a feeling of pure devotional service in the hearts of the hearers. So that I think that's something we should be especially hopeful to achieve. This is a classic story to explain how to go from sakam to nishkam bhakti, or start at the bottom, mixed bhakti, going to pure bhakti, and in between is quite a journey for most of us. So there are sometimes external and more commonly internal obstacles or hindrances or things that block us from achieving that. So I'm not going to ask for you to volunteer. What are your personal obstacles or blocks, internal or external, interpersonal? But there are some for all of us, and they're in different categories. And to overcome them, hearing the story, at least the sound vibration itself will help us overcome those obstacles, and hearing the kind of determination and kind of devotion that Dhruva had, naturally, we hear nicely, naturally our determination will increase. So what do I want to receive from the Dhruva Maharaj story to cross over? These are just reflections. The next little section, there's some places where in Prabhupada's writings he refers to Dhruva Maharaj, starting with Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 11. Generally, people come into the association of devotees to mitigate some material wants. But the influence of a pure devotee frees a man from all material desires by enabling him to relish the taste for devotional service. So he points to Dhruva. Devotional service is so nice and pure that it purifies the devotee, and he forgets all material ambitions as soon as he engages fully in the transcendental loving service of Krishna. A practical example is Dhruva Maharaj, who wanted something material from Krishna and therefore engaged in devotional service. When the Lord appeared before Dhruva Maharaj as four-handed Vishnu, Dhruva told him, "My dear Lord, because I engaged in your devotional service with great austerity and penances, I am now seeing you, whom even great demigods and sages have difficult seeing. Now I am pleased, and all my desires are satisfied. I do not want anything else. I was searching for some broken glass, but instead I have found a great and valuable gem." Thus, Dhruva Maharaj expressed his full satisfaction and refused to ask anything from the Lord. This is the verse from Bhagavad Gita 7:16, and Prabhupada speaks about Narada in this connection. Four kinds of pious men render service. Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritanarjuna arto jigyasu artarti gyanicha. Prabhupada makes reference to this in 11th canto, chapter 3, text number 40. This is, when one seriously engages in devotional service of the personality of Godhead, fixing the Lord's lotus feet within one's heart as the only goal of life, one can destroy the innumerable impure desires lodged within the heart as a result of one's previous fruitive work within the three modes of material nature. When the heart is thus purified, one can directly perceive both the Supreme Lord and oneself as transcendental entities. Thus, one becomes perfect in spiritual understanding through direct experience, just as one can directly experience the sunshine through normal, healthy vision. Vishwanath Prabhupada writes, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has stated that the perfect stage of devotional service indicated in this verse can be observed in the activities of such great devotees as Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj approached the personality of Godhead desiring a political adjustment on the material platform, but when purified by chanting the holy name of God, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, he felt no further need for material sense gratification, as stated in the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Dhaniyatiyashu Vairagyam. As soon as one advances in devotional service, one is freed from the embarrassment of superficial material desires. So these are scriptural references to help us imbibe the perspective and the feeling that the Dhruva Maharaj story is meant to convey. There's several more references. The history of Dhruva Maharaj illustrates the purifying power of Krishna consciousness. There's the jewel and there's the broken glass. Dhruva Maharaj sought out the Supreme Lord as a way to obtain a material kingdom. But after he had performed severe austerities and came face to face with Lord Vishnu, he declared, Swamin Katartosmi Varam Niyache, quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. My dear Lord, I am fully satisfied. I do not ask from you any benediction for material sense gratification. And there's several places. The reference is from Hari Bhakti Sudodaya. It's quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's quoted in Mukunda Malva Stotra. It's an important, we hear Prabhupada speaking it over and over. Swamin Katartosmi Varam Dayache. It's not from the Bhagavatam, but it's in reference to the Dhruva story. And we should be also following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya and the rest of our acharyas, along with Dhruva, following Dhruva's example. The great sage Maitreya recommended, this is toward the end of the whole story, the Dhruva story. One should chant the character and activities of Dhruva Maharaj both in the morning and in the evening with great attention and care in a society of brahmanas or other twice-born persons. Here's Lord Chaitanya following that principle. From Chaitanya Bhagavat, the characteristics of Prahlad are described in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the characteristics of Dhruva are described in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sri Gadadhar Pandit Goswami was the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Gaurasundara was the listener. He attentively heard topics of Prahlad and Dhruva's cultivation of devotional service from the mouth of Gadadhar hundreds of times. Prabhupada writes in the teachings of Queen Kunti, this is the last of these references from Prabhupada's writings. When Dhruva Maharaj was undergoing penance and meditating upon the form of Vishnu within his heart, the Vishnu form suddenly disappeared and his meditation broke. Upon opening his eyes, Dhruva Maharaj immediately saw Vishnu before him. Like Dhruva Maharaj, we should always think of Krishna. And when we attain perfection, we shall see Krishna before us. This is the process. We should not be too hasty. We should wait for the mature time. Of course, it is good to be eager to see Krishna, but we should not become discouraged if we do not see him immediately. So the section covers 5 chapters, from chapter 8 through chapter 12. Here's the titles of the chapters, taken directly from Prabhupada's writings. So the main part of the Dhruva story we're most familiar with. Dhruva leaves home, and then he returns back home. And in between, he gets perfection, sees Vishnu, has exchange with Vishnu. Vishnu departs and he goes back home. Then after he becomes king, there's 3 chapters. And we'll cover those far more quickly. His stepbrother was killed by the Yakshas, so he engages in punishing the Yakshas. Swayambhuva Manu comes and tells him to stop fighting. And because he immediately stops fighting, then Kuvera, the leader of the Yakshas, comes and gives him some benediction. Dhruva rules the kingdom for a long period of time and he goes back to Godhead. So that's the 5 chapters, the quick summary. Now, there are some devotees that teach Bhakti Vaibhav. Bhakti Vaibhav is a nice term for the studying of the first 6 cantos of the Bhagavatam. And what comes next is a little summary from those who have taught Bhakti Vaibhav, specifically what their reference they make about the Dhruva Maharaj story. So he starts as a young boy. He goes into the forest to achieve perfection. He receives the mercy of Lord Vishnu. He becomes a king and has an encounter with the Yakshas, and he goes back to Godhead. Those are those sections, the 5 sections of the Dhruva Maharaj story. He's a prince, and he becomes an unalloyed devotee. And the history, the storyline, begins with his stepmother, Suruchi, speaking very harshly. There you see in the painting, her body language tells everything. But she's instructing Dhruva to get off. Don't try to get on the lap of your father. You'll have to die and take birth again from my womb to be able to get on your father's lap, as well as to be seated on the throne, because he's the eldest son. He's destined to become the king, and she's telling him no. So when she speaks so insultingly to him, he turns to his father, and his father doesn't say anything. So he bursts out in tears, runs to his mother, and tells everything that happened. The elders who were in the palace explain everything to her as well, and she gives him very nice instruction. The nice instruction that Suniti gives is very important in the whole Dhruva story. It's one of the keys. And Mangalam, Mamangalam, My dear son, do not wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain. You want a kingdom? Without delay, you must engage yourself in worshiping the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead. She is advising him, don't go in this path of retaliation and anger, being angry and wish ill against your stepmother or your father. You want the kingdom? Go to Vishnu and he can help you get the kingdom. So we'll hear about this as we go further. Respond to circumstances that are difficult without reacting to those circumstances. Rather than react, you respond from the heart. That's a key, one of the keys to the Dhruva story. So he, taking the advice of his mother, he asks, where do I find Vishnu? She said, I've heard that sages, they go to the forest and they somehow find Vishnu. So he decides to go to the forest immediately. And he doesn't find Vishnu. He finds animals and mosquitoes and bees and birds and trees and all kinds of things, but doesn't find Vishnu. But Narada hears the son of Uttanapada is going to the forest looking for Vishnu. So Narada comes, and Dhruva is very happy to see him. He understands who he is, and so he makes a request of Narada to help him find Vishnu. Now, Agha Nena Panina, by that hand which can drive away all sinful activities, Narada touched Dhruva and blessed him. So a very important key is getting the blessings of elevated personalities like Narada. Dhruva expressed his determination to perform austerities and requested a process. So Dhruva is being honest with his material ambitions, and Narada, after examining him, is ready to give his blessings. Very important, both combination. From Prabhupada's purport in this section, one particular point mentioned here is that Dhruva Maharaj wanted to occupy an exalted position not by hook or crook, but by honest means. This indicates that if Krishna offered him such a position, then he would accept it. That is the nature of a devotee. He may desire material gain, but he accepts it only if Krishna offers it. So all of this evening is just a kind of introduction. Tomorrow evening we're going to start with the first verse of chapter 5. This is just background, the Dhruva story, step by step by step. And here, these are key lessons. Here's the third one, determination and discipline. So he asked Narada for a method to attain Vishnu. He gives them details, pages and pages and pages, where to go, what to do, the mantra to chant, how to sit, everything. So he follows Narada's orders. Narada gave him his mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And this is now teaching from Patanjali Yoga Sutras. From the process, when the process of yoga is given by the spiritual master, there's three important elements. There's Sanskrit terms that go with this, but it's to be performed over a long period of time, faithfully, and with some consistency every day, and with some reverence to the person who one has received the process from, as well as reverence for the ultimate object of that process. I mean, like the Prachetas did the same thing. They received some stotras from Lord Shiva, some prayers, and they observed those prayers for a long time. And Lord Vishnu came before them. Similar. I mean, different, but similar. So when we receive instructions with determination, with faith, with proper discipline, one carries them out. This is third key. Now, following all those instructions, what were some of those instructions? Control your mind and speech. Be peaceful. Be satisfied with eating whatever is available in the forest. Meditate on the Lord's transcendental activities. Follow in the footsteps of previous devotees. These are all directly in the words spoken by Narada to Dhruva. And chant this mantra, by which the Lord will fulfill all your desires. So those are his instructions. And what did Dhruva do? Well, it was pretty intense what Dhruva did. When he reached Madhuvan, I said Mahavan, but it's Madhuvan. Madhuvan. He took his bath in the Jamuna and started worshipping the Lord with his mantra. And then these austerities in the first month, kapita fruits. A little research, kapita fruits are known for being like gorilla fruits, meaning they're not meant for human consumption. They're really hard. They're really hard. And that's what he had, kapita fruits and berries, once in 3 days. For 1 month. Once a day. Second month, dry grass and leaves. Yummy. Once in 6 days. I hope we offered it to Vishnu. Third month, water every 9 days. This is not possible for us. Fourth month, air every 12 days. By the fifth month, Dhruva controlled his breath and mind, stood motionless on 1 foot like a pillar, and meditated on the Lord's form without diversion. His controlling of his breathing was so intense that the air in the universe was choked up. The demigods became choked up. The whole universe was choked up. They went to Lord Vishnu, help. We don't know what's going on. I've never had this experience before. And Vishnu said, no worries. It's this little boy, he's doing Ashtanga Yoga. I'll go take care of it. You go back to your demigod kingdom. Everything will be all right. And he appeared before him. This is beginning section of the second chapter of this 5-chapter story. The form of the Lord, which was brilliant like lightning and in which Dhruva Maharaj in his mature yogic process was fully absorbed in meditation, all of a sudden disappeared. Thus Dhruva was perturbed and his meditation broke. But as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally present, just as he had been seeing the Lord in his heart. Now there's his benedicting hand reaching out. Dhruva offers his obeisances again and again in great ecstasy. The next verse. When Dhruva Maharaj saw his Lord in front of him, he was greatly agitated and offered him obeisances in respect. He fell flat before him like a rod and became absorbed in love of Godhead. Dhruva Maharaj in ecstasy looked upon the Lord as if he were drinking the Lord with his eyes, kissing the lotus feet of the Lord with his mouth, and embracing the Lord with his arms. So this is a fourth key, somehow getting the mercy of the personality of Godhead. I mean, wasn't that a nice story that about Prabhupada and Janmashtami in 1954? He didn't go around telling people about his ecstasies, or Krishna appeared before him and gave him a garland or something like that. But that was what he was carrying inside, and with that, he didn't stay in Vrindavan. He sacrificed his health and his everything to give Krishna consciousness to the world. I'm going to read 2 other things. Giriraj Maharaj, the 4th of July happened just a few days ago. And he wrote something on the occasion of the 4th of July. And what he wrote is very nice. See if I can find it. Yeah. Giriraj Maharaj writes, so when he was leaving Dallas Fort Worth Airport on July 4th, he saw a big American flag, and he suddenly became very ecstatic, and he was surprised why he became ecstatic, and then he became ecstatic because he remembered a Prabhupada story. And here's the Prabhupada story. I reflected on how fortunate we were to live in a country where we have freedom of religion, and how Srila Prabhupada said, quote, America has been so good to me, to give me money, men, everything. I have no designation that this is my country, but because they have given me so much facility, I cannot forget my obligation to them. I want to make them happy, and through them, the whole world. That's our founder, Acharya. There's another very nice. Srila Prabhupada was asked, why do you keep traveling across the countries? Prabhupada smiled and said, to stop your traveling in 8.4 million species. Well, when you get the mercy of Krishna, you want to distribute the mercy of Krishna. Or, as he says, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, there's no one more dear to me than he who teaches this message. And Prabhupada was obviously very dear to Krishna. No doubt about it. I mean, not just because Krishna gave him a garland on Janmashtami, but to empower, as Prabhupada was empowered, to distribute Krishna Bhakti like it's never been done before in the history of the world. The history of the world, it's never been done before in such a short period of time. Now, there's technology they took advantage of, but same opportunity is there for everybody else. And he was a recipient of Krishna's mercy, because without being recipient of Krishna's mercy, you can't do what he did. So there's magic in the Lord's mercy, which Dhruva got. When he saw the Lord and was paying obeisances again and again, he wanted to express something, but he was just a young boy, and he was also stunned. So the Lord touched him with his conch shell, so that he was then able to speak nicely. So he offered very beautiful prayers. Although Dhruva Maharaj was a small boy, he wanted to offer prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in suitable language, but because he was inexperienced, he could not adjust himself immediately. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, being situated in everyone's heart, could understand Dhruva Maharaj's awkward position. Out of his causeless mercy, he touched his conch shell to the forehead of Dhruva Maharaj, who stood before him with folded hands. Next verse purport. Dhruva Maharaj never went to any school or academic teacher to learn the Vedic conclusion. But because of his devotional service to the Lord, as soon as the Lord appeared and touched his forehead with his conch shell, automatically the entire Vedic conclusion was revealed to him. So he was able to offer proper prayers. So you can go to school, you can wait to be touched by the Lord's conch shell. Probably better to do your Bhakti Shastri studies with a good teacher and become qualified. Getting mercy from the Supreme Personality of Godhead through his devotees. His prayer begins saying his senses had become completely enlivened. He felt that the Lord was the shelter of him and all devotees. He then expresses great humility. This is another important key. In spite of having you, who are like a desire tree, the cause of liberation from birth and death, foolish persons such as me desire benedictions from you for sense gratification, which are available even for those who live in hellish conditions. We're still on the 9th chapter of this section. The bliss derived from devotional service cannot be compared to that experienced by Gyanis and Yogis. That's easy. The Brahman state of realization, even the Paramatma state of realization, doesn't have the Ananda portion of the Lord Swarup Shakti. Devotional service is the most ecstatic, naturally. My Lord, the transcendental bliss derived from meditating on your lotus feet or hearing about your glories from pure devotees is so unlimited that it is far beyond the stage of Brahmananda. He is expressing these stages of spiritual realization, although he's just a little boy. And he hasn't even attended Bhakti Sastri class. Therefore, Dhruva prays for association of devotees. Bhadram te, let all good fortune be to you. He gives him rulership over the planet Earth for 36,000 years. And when that rulership is over, he'll go to Dhruva Loka. And then Vishnu disappears. Now, how do you think Dhruva felt? He felt ecstatic and sad at the same time. Sad